are live. Welcome, everyone, to the first session of Breaking into the U.S. Market, a Global Business Playbook. I am your host. Funny saying that. I'm so excited about this. Rachel Fuller with Escalon Services. I am the head of the International Business Division at Escalon, and we are your everything you need for your back office. So accounting, taxes, compliance, payroll, CFO services, anything that you could possibly need for back office for your business, we're here to help you with that. The purpose of this series is to help our international founders who are trying to expand into the US market with everything they need to get started with that. So, the series is going to cover a lot of topics. We're talking about immigration, setting up US entity, tech stacks, your banking and legal providers. But first, we're starting with US immigration because it's a hot topic right now. And with us to talk about this is Ramiro Robayas with Tukey AI. And he is the one of the founders of Tukey. Tukey is a SaaS enabled immigration service. And he can explain more to this, but it's very cool. I want to introduce Ramiro. Ramiro, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and Tukey and what led you to this?
Thanks, Rachel, and great to be here. Thanks to Rachel, the Escalon team, for putting this together. I think it's just great to make this series of webinars just to explain like all the steps. As it's hard once you come to the US. There's many things to consider. Immigration is just the first step, but there's many other things that you need to manage as you come here. So it's just great, and thanks for inviting us to be here. So I'm originally from Argentina. I came to the US around 5, 6 years ago. I suffered immigration, the immigration process, and the traditional law firms process. And that inspired us basically to make something better, right? To make like a better service to immigrants. As immigration is pretty central to your life. Basically, if you don't get this sorted out, you cannot stay in the country. You need to pick your kids from school and leave with very short notice. So it's really important, right? It's really important the quality of the service, the quality of the product you put together to send to the government, speed, transparency, all these things. So Tuki is about that. So we basically combined great attorneys in our team with great technology just to get kind of the best of the two worlds there. Because we do believe you need both. You still need the great attorneys that are going to interpret the law and have the legal strategy to put your case together. But ideally, you enable them with technology, with tools to make their job easier and to avoid mistakes that are very costly, to avoid delays, and just to provide an overall better service. And that's what we're doing with Tuki.
That's amazing. So, can you tell me a little bit about just a little bit more what happened with your journey that led you to this?
Yeah. So
What
back then
inspired
I
you?
was working for McKinsey, the global consultancy firm. And I was an engagement manager or an associate partner at that point. So my visa it should have been like extremely easy, right? Like it should have been one of those cases where you look it from the outside and it's like, yeah, this is like a no-brainer. It should be like super smooth. It wasn't. I was chasing my attorneys every single week. I was not getting responses. Whenever I got a response, it was always like 1 week to 10 days after I sent an email. It was usually a template. Well, it was not even responding to my email. I couldn't speak with anyone. Um, they kept making dozens of mistakes. I corrected some mistakes and then they sent me another version. There were new mistakes on that. And the whole process took like 6 months to put together a fairly simple petition. And it was just, it's just so stressful at that moment, right? Like you depend on this. And in my particular situation, because of the visa I was at, I couldn't change jobs. Like if I didn't have the visa, if I didn't get the green card and I happened to be laid off because of whatever reason, that's it. I had to leave the country in 60 days, right? So you don't want to be there, right? You feel a slave to that company or to that job. So for me, the green card was very important. So every day that got delayed was, was pretty bad. So that was kind of my experience of like delays, mistakes, non-responsiveness, lack of communication, zero transparency of what was happening on the other side. So, I mean, the thing is, after that, I spoke with dozens of friends. Most of them had the same experience, right? And now that I'm talking with hundreds of clients, I hear stories from other law firms. And that's the norm. Like that's the norm in US immigration. Like not knowing what's happening with your petition, taking forever, many mistakes, just frustrating experience. And it's something just too important not to have like a good provider that is going to really help you and support you in the right way.
Very important. And it's not just that adds to the time where we already have delays in actually processing these applications from the side of the US government. So delays on top of delays and just very frustrating.
Yeah,
So
because I mean that's one part you cannot control. There's a lot of difference in adjudication from officer to officer, and now with the layoffs that are happening in the government, uh, probably those processing times are going to be expanded, right? So yeah, there's one frustrating part you cannot control. At least we should improve the one we have control over, right?
perfect. So now you have Tukey, and Tukey is fills in the gap and helps to assist immigrants coming in, applying for the visas, and at least clears up that process and communication back and forth. You know where everything stands. There's real-time tracking for that, at least within your system. What happens in the government side, not so much. We can guess, we can give you assumed timelines, but again, that is what it is. We can't, but you can control that part of it with your communication back and forth. So from there, we now have Tukey to help with this process. You have legal representatives behind Tukey. So we have actual legal support. We're not just, you're not just a SaaS company designing these process flows. Um, I'm a natural born US citizen. So the process for me, when I started reading up on this and getting ready for this, I'm going through and my mind is just boggled because I have some inkling of it. And then I'm going, oh my goodness, look at all the different ways, all the different types of visas that you can apply for. And they're all based on your unique situation. And I guess you're the legal guy, but we should probably say, by the way, that anything that we're talking about on here, and especially anything I say, is not legal advice. I am not an attorney. This is why we have you here. I probably should have said this in the introduction. A little excited about being on here and talking and providing good content for everyone. But Escalon does a lot of great things. We're not attorneys. There are very strict laws regarding providing legal advice. So when we have a situation come up where we have a founder coming into the US from another country, we're going to refer out to a trusted legal partner in order to provide that advice. And Tukey is a partner that can do that. So we have we have these founders coming in and they're ready to apply for the visas. What are we looking at as some of the main types of visas that they're going to be applying for?
Yeah, that was great clarification. I'm also not an attorney, so everything I say is not legal advice. I have attorneys in the team, so every time we are working with a founder or with any immigrant or company, we always like every legal advice question goes to them.
Perfect.
But still, like I think we can provide some good context on some of these main things. I'm going to share this because I think it's a bit easier just to overall. As Rachel mentioned correctly, there's many visas. We are not going to go over every single visa in the universe. We are just going to focus on the main types of them for founders or executives trying to come to the US. So I would say that the huge majority of founders actually go with the O1. Like that's your visa, typically, generally speaking. So even though we have four columns, I would say that probably 95% or even more of founders come here on an O1. And that will explain, very quickly the main differences of these four columns and why. So the O1, it's called the Extraordinary Ability Visa, um, is based on you as an individual, right? So it doesn't really focus that much on your company, on how big it is, on how long has it been doing businesses, how many people you employ, what's the revenue. And that's why so many, especially early stage founders, choose it because you don't need to put pressure on the company, right? Sometimes you maybe incorporated recently, or maybe you had a company abroad and then now you're opening a US subsidiary, or just starting operations here. Um, and you don't have that much to show, right? But maybe you got some press, you got funding, you got some good roles in previous companies or even here. You have some things you can show about yourself. So it's a great path to, again, not don't put any stress on the company and just focus on yourself and get this visa. You get it for like 3 years. You can start building your company here, and there's other. So that would be the solution, again, 9 out of 10 times or even more for most founders, especially early stage. Now, a second option here is the L1, which, as you can see, the name is like intra-company transferee. So what this means is now the focus shifts to the company and to your role within the company. But it's not just one company. You actually need two. So you need to have a foreign company, let's say, in my case, Argentina, and you must have been working there for at least a year, and you need to have a managerial or executive role, right? So typically you already have 4, 5, 6, 7 people you are managing. And then you have another company in the US, maybe you just open it or you have it established from before. So the company from Argentina in this case is transferring you to the US as an international manager. So the problem here, typically for early stage founders, is that there's like a lot of pressure. You need to have a certain structure abroad. You need to have a certain structure in the US. You need to be managing those people. And even though there's an option of this visa that is called new office, so it means that the only thing you have is the company abroad, and you're coming to open the new subsidiary, so that's fine, and the requirements are much more flexible. So you can be the only one, day one, opening it. But in that case, 1 year from now, you will be required to show your progress and how many people you hired and how many people you're managing. So again, there's a lot of pressure within 1 year to maybe hire 3, 4, 5 people, have operations, have revenue. So again, it's a lot of stress, especially when you're on the earlier side. So that's why it's not ideal. Now, if you're a larger company and that's actually your plan and you're planning to hire a lot of people and manage them, then maybe it's a good thing for in your case, right? Moving on, yeah,
More commonly on that. So if we can simplify it even further, your owners, your founders, maybe your CEO, probably coming in under extraordinary ability, the O1 visa. And then L1 is when you're ready to pull over someone who is a management, say they're COO, or they're
yeah,
someone to actually get things up and moving off the ground when you're ready to invest that money and hire US employees.
yeah, that's perfectly a thing. And again, it's not required that everyone from the founding team or from the C-suite have the same visa. It's perfectly okay if like one
Right.
comes with the O1 and the other one comes on the L1. Um, And then the E2, it's kind of similar in that sense that you can bring people on this visa, maybe not the founders, but I mean it's a bit more flexible in that sense. Now the E2 is a tricky investor. So if the O1 is focused on you as an individual and the L1 is focused on the two companies and your role, the E2 is focused on the investment, right? So how much money are you investing in the US? Are you having the potential to hire US workers to develop the economy? The thing with day two is that it's only, I mean, your country needs to be part of the treaty. There's like 80, 90 countries that are part of that treaty. I mean, there's a list online, you can check it out. So if your country is not in that list, like this is not an option. But if it is, you might benefit from day two, right? And day two actually has two subsets. One is the investor, So actually, if you put the money yourself, but the other one is essential employees, right? So maybe you haven't put the money yourself, but you're essential to the operations of this business. For example, in the case you brought up, Rachel, of the COO. So you could bring that COO under the E2. Now, the thing with the E2 is that again, Argentina, for example, is part of the treaty, right? Or Colombia. So it's a Colombia. Um, so if I want to benefit from the E2, 50% of or more from the company needs to be in hands of Colombian nationals, right? So let's say you raised VC funding from many investors and now 60% of the company is owned by VC firms, then that's not going to work, right? So that's kind of like it's typically not such a great option for founders who are raising money because also if one of the founders gets a green card, they stop counting as a foreign national. So one of the founders gets the green card, and then now all of a sudden everyone loses their E2. So if you're planning on raising money or the owners getting green cards, then the E2 might work for a short period of time, but then at some point it stops working. So that's why the E2 is generally like a great fit for people wanting to do more traditional businesses. Let's say you want to buy a franchise, you want to open a restaurant, like this type of businesses, it's a great fit. But for startups, again, you might be able to use it in some cases, but it's not the natural fit. And then finally, the H1B. Again, H1B is not the normal fit for like a founder, it's more for like employees. This is based on your specialty occupation. So if you have a bachelor or similar to a bachelor, I won't make do the details there, but let's just say with the base case, you have a bachelor's, let's say in economics, and then you are hired to do a job related to your field of study in economics, to some certain subjects you took. So then you can go for the H1B, but there's a lottery, right? So there's a lottery every March, so you need to be subjected to that lottery, and then if you win the lottery, you can then apply. But so this is actually a great option for employees that maybe are going to have a hard time getting an O1, and maybe the company situation is not good for L1 or E2. So then you can go with the H1B, but again, you need to go through the lottery, most cases.
And then
So again,
on the lottery, the limits compared to the applications, I was doing some light reading for immigration stats this morning, and it's amazing. The limits are so small, and yet the applications, there's so many people applying for that H-1B. Your
yeah,
chances
historically
are
the
very slim on that
yeah
one.
historically the selection rate was like 10, 15, 20%. This year, because they changed some things in terms of like the cost to apply and how they manage applications, the selection rate was higher, was like 35%. But still, it's just one in three, right? So it's still a
Right.
lottery. So it might work, it might not work. So it's not like a certain path, right? So I still encourage people to apply. I mean, when you're in January or February, if you're even thinking of coming, right, to the US, I think it's always a good idea just to try your luck and see if you get it, right? And if you get it, that's great. For the founders, it's a bit challenging. The H1B was not originally thought for founders. There is a change that happened January 7th this year that they included formally the figure of like beneficiary owner. So even if you own part of the company, like you can still go for that. Let's see how USCIS interprets that, like the officer in practice, because a lot of times there's things in the regulation that are clearly going in one direction, and then the adjudication goes in the other one. So I think it's a bit early to see if that's going to have any change, but they typically want to see employer-employee relationship. They don't want to think that you're self-sponsoring your job with a shell company. They just want to see that this is a real job, and more often than not, that that the company can fire you, hire you, discipline you, right? It's different. Like the company, making this petition for the immigrant are two separate entities and not just one and the same, right?
Right.
So especially when you have ownership control, let's say more than 50%, it starts to get tricky, and it's ideal to have either a board of directors or something that can actually manage your job, right? And that counts for most of these visas.
So with those visas, if I know there's time limits on each of them. And then some of them you can renew, some of them, and again, can we go through a little bit of
Yeah,
that just to provide
of
that?
course. Yeah, so the O1, they give it to you for a total of 3 years, and then you can renew every 1 year. Recently, again, there was a change that they are a bit more flexible to renew every three, but regardless, like you can renew indefinitely. So technically, you could be 40 years on O1, right? If you wanted to, there's no limit. L1, there's L1A, that is the one we talked about, has a limit of 7 years. So you get it for 3 years, then you renew for two more, and that's it. Like that's 7 years, and then you cannot keep renewing the L1. Day two, generally they give it to you for 5 years. Some countries it's less, maybe 3 years, 1 year. But then again, you can renew it indefinitely as well. And the H1B, they give it to you for 3 years, and then you can only renew it once, up to 6 years, with one exception, that is that if you have already started the green card process and you have certain approval in the middle of that, so if you have already certain part of that approved, then you can keep renewing. But it's just in that example, right? If you haven't done that, then after the 6 years, that's done.
And then curious, are all four of the visas, are they an easy application, easy being relative to all of this, obviously, but is it easy to then apply for the green card? Is it easier to apply once you've been approved for one of the four visas?
So technically, what the government says is that they adjudicate each petition on their own merits, and they don't look for other things.
Mhm.
I still think that we're all humans and we are all subject to, hey, if you already got an O1, if you're going for the AV1, there's some precedent that you got approved on that, even though they say they don't. But one important thing to call out here is that, I mean, I think this has verticals, right? So most of the time, a non-immigrant visa, like this, the work visas, as we call them, USCIS call them non-immigrant visas because technically they are temporary. They have a very similar immigrant visa, or in other words, green cards, right? So, for example, the O1A, the Extraordinary Ability Visa, it's very similar to the EB1A, that is the Extraordinary Ability Green Card. Actually, the requirements are extremely similar, right? The bar is much higher. It's not the same. It's not that every single person getting an O1 can get an EB1, but it's the same, right? It's the same concept. It's about you. It's very similar. There are some differences, of course, but similar. Then the L1A, for example, the intracompany transferee for executives or managers, have a very similar green card, which is called EB1C. That is also called intracompany transferee. The E2, the investment visa, has the EB5, that is the investor visa, immigrant visa, which you need to invest between 800,000 and $1,050,000, which it's a higher threshold,
That's
and it needs to be
that's
your
that number.
funds.
Yeah, that's that number I was looking for. So just
Yeah,
as an aside on that, just real quick, since you brought it up, there's articles out there and in the news, Trump has got all of the comments. Of course, we're going to go there about, oh, well, if you'll invest, what was the number I heard? $5 million. Here you
5
go.
million. Yeah,
Here's US citizenship. There you go. And people are looking at it as, oh, this is crazy. They're selling US citizenships. Well, it's kind of been happening,
yeah,
right? It's
it
it's been
has.
there. Maybe just the price
It
tag's changed.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been there. And most of these investment visas. So there's two ways to get the EB5. One way is through your own personal investment in your project. So let's say you invest in your company and you demonstrate that, and you demonstrate that you have employed 10 employees for like 2 years in a row. Like that's kind of the requirements. And then you get it, and you get a conditional one, and you get a final one. Doesn't matter the details. But the more often than not, actually, is through regional centers. So what they do is that they are building like commercial real estate or construction projects, and they just group many investors, and they use that money to develop in the US, right? I just don't understand the math between the gold card. I mean, between the amount of people that are outside of the US that have the potential to buy that, and most of them, in my opinion, don't even want to get subject to US taxes, right? So
Right.
I don't know. Like I don't I'm generally don't know how that's going to work if that's going to work. We haven't heard any details so far. There's just a website and just announcements and big numbers thrown out there, but we haven't seen any details. We haven't seen any details about how that's going to work, if that's going to work, how that's going to work with the AB5. Because to your point, like if I can get a green card with, investing 5 million or 100,000, like the decision is very easy for me. So
Right.
I don't know, hard to, for now, it's been a lot of marketing and announcements and talk, but the details are very, very scarce.
It sounds like a lot of hype, a lot of
Yeah.
marketing from the
Yeah.
Trump administration. But at the same time, it's another option. Do you see any significant differences between? I mean, obviously, you have to show that you're in good standing in your country, that you're not a criminal, that you have, a good, you can contribute something to the US economy, to society. I mean, the doors aren't just wide open when it comes to that. But there again, most people that are coming and looking to found a business, um, my gut feeling on that is that that's their goal, they want to build something. They're going to, just because of their drive and their ambition, they're going to contribute to the US economy, and meet the requirements there.
Yeah. I mean, look, I mean, all the impacts of immigrants, of hardworking immigrants that are coming to develop this country are very clear. That doesn't mean that because you're an immigrant, you're good or bad. I mean, we're all
No,
different people, right? I mean, there's good immigrants, good U.S. nationals, bad U.S. nationals. Like, there's, where it's a big world out there.
right.
But I do think that, attracting the very qualified people from across the world is a unique advantage the U.S. has. Like just having a lot of bright people wanting to come to the US and work here is kind of, the best thing you can get as a country.
Absolutely. So some little numbers that I was looking at, because I'm a little bit of a numbers geek. So 14% of the US population is made up of immigrants. Now, this is just a quick Google search. Um, so don't quote me on that. Don't hold me accountable to this. But I also found that there was something like 33% of new businesses are also owned or partially owned by US immigrants. And
Yeah.
that's just telling to me.
And there's like, I think 50 or 55% of unicorns in the US that were founded with at least one immigrant founder. Like there's many great things that have happened here, but I think, in the problem, I think, is that sometimes even in the public discourse or social media, there's a lot of confusion between like different type of immigrants and what that means. Like it's not all the same. It's very similar. And again, then there's all the personal preferences on like how open should you be or not with humanitarian or work or family. And again, right, it's a very personal decision of what you need to make, right? But the specific section we are talking about in this webinar, at least the work ones, like I cannot understand any argument against like bringing, the best people here.
The
And there
best.
has been a lot
Yeah,
of criticism about like fraud, and I agree that needs to stop. Like we shouldn't be having fraud or any of these things. But all these discussions also of like, yeah, you need to bar immigrants. We don't want to compete with them. It's like, look, remote work is a thing. Like they can still hire them in their country. So that's
I
still going
work
to happen.
100% remotely. I talk to people across the globe, that have US businesses. So, yeah, if they want to come here and work, so be it. If you're, from my point of view, and this is my vertical, this is what my entire vertical is built off of within my organization, is assisting those people who want to come to the US market from other countries. So I'm all for it, right? People are gonna work. They're gonna find a way. And what better way than to come to the US? It contributes, it builds jobs, it creates
Yeah.
jobs for naturalized US citizens. So this is, to me, this is critical to the growth of our economy. Um, Ideas
Yeah,
brought in from other people, other cultures, other countries. We are the great melting pot.
yeah.
And we have, based on that interaction with multiple cultures and multiple groups of people, we've, invented and created some of the most amazing things of all time. So,
And look, I think that there's been a lot of talk about diversity and how diversity is great, right? Because you have different points of view and different opinions, and we're all different. So the more diverse you can get an environment, the more opinions and the richer it's going to be. And I think this is a big part of that, right? Like bringing people from all over the world with very different viewpoints about a lot of things, with the very different education systems and learnings. I think that's actually one of the things that have really made America great, and just really expanded the country, the economy, and the culture, right? So yeah, I fully agree.
yeah. So let's go back to a couple of truth versus fiction on what's happening with immigration, because that's a big part of the topic. And again, we're talking about legal immigration here. We're not talking about illegal immigration. We're not talking about border crossers. We're just talking about business founders and the processes involved. So we're not going to go into opinions on anything else. It's all over the news. Anybody that wants to read it, grab your popcorn and plan to fact check all of that. In the meantime, what I want to know for your founders that have applied in the last 6 months, are you seeing extended timelines for approvals? Are you seeing any delays in getting those applications through?
No, no. I mean, for most work visas and most visas in general, most processes, you can actually pay the government a premium processing fee. It's expensive. It's like $2,805. And instead of them taking 6 to 8 months replying, or sometimes in green cards, 12, 15 months, they reply to you, most cases 15 business days. So that's still there. And even the bar for adjudication, I haven't seen a wide change, right? Like I don't think the standard in most cases, let's say today versus 1 year ago, it's significantly different, right? Like maybe there's more adjudication, like a bit, maybe, but I don't think it's a significant change versus other types, like, when you're talking about humanitarian, TPS, other things that the policy has shifted dramatically. But with business visas, like beyond some annoyance or, higher scrutiny or whatever it is, I would say is very, very similar. And again, when you look at I've sometimes analyzed data and I've seen adjudication numbers, some of these visas, the O1, the L1, the E2, over the last 10, 12 years, and maybe 4 administrations or 3 administrations, they haven't changed dramatically. Like when you see, Obama, Trump one, Biden, the numbers were fairly stable, right? So beyond all these headlines and all these, very hot discussions and topics on social media, reality is that business immigration has remained fairly stable. Again, in the big scheme of things, right? I'm not saying there's no details here and there, no scrutiny, no like ridiculous adjudications that's there. But we also had them last year as well, right? So
Right.
it's not that it's a different new world there. I still think that it's very, very possible to come with a business visa. And I think most administrations, again, beyond political posturing and messaging, I think most administrations understand that this is a really, really important part of our society. And again, right, like one, small example, when you look at the new, famous Meta super intelligence team and you see like, hey, 50, 75% of this team are immigrants, like, hey, how are you going to do this thing next time, right? If you don't, if you start blocking this, right? So I think most people in the business world and the government, I think, kind of understand and see that the level of importance and relevance that qualified immigrants bring to society.
Absolutely. So we're not seeing any changes with recent government layoffs affecting the U.S. ICS
I
approvals or
mean,
for any types of
no,
slip downs with that? Because that's
I
very,
mean, some details, like for example, there's like some technicality here. So when you send your petition, that by the way, you need to FedEx it. So it's pretty funny. Like a typical O1 maybe has like 1,000 pages. So what we do is we need to print the 1,000 pages. We need to put it in a box because there's no envelope will hold 1,000 pages. We need to
right.
FedEx the box with the 1,000 pages to USCIS, most often in Dallas, Texas, for example. They open that box and someone reviews that and then they scan it in black and white for some reason. Like so there's like these weird things happening. But what I wanted to tell you is that because of the layoffs and some things or may change of providers, we've seen some wrongful rejections at the mailroom staff because they didn't know what they were doing and they were asking things that were wrong. So these things do happen, right? When you see people that maybe are not as trained or changing provider or new, or they were laid off and they have less capacity. So yes, you do see some issues with that in terms of delays when you're not paying premium processing. And when you are paying premium processing, if there's less people to handle the same number of petitions, right? They are more in a rush. So it's easier to make more mistakes. So yes, I mean there are some things, but again, it's not like last
No,
year there was like
no
a 90%
significant.
approval rate and now 50, right? It's still similar. Again, it might be more annoying, or you need to do more work, or you need to manage some wrongful adjudications. But generally speaking, as a country and as a general immigration trend, I would say we are still in the same direction.
One other question I have for you. Let's talk about timelines. As an individual is looking to come to the US, when do they need to start planning? I mean, obviously, we've got the delays for getting everything approved, the back
Yeah.
and forths. What's a realistic timeline to plan for?
So I think as soon as you realize you will eventually want to come here, you should speak with someone that, an attorney, because you might not be ready, like you might not qualify, right? So forget about preparation time. Sometimes you need to build some things or improve your profile to become eligible, right? So a lot of times we keep rejecting clients, right? Because they say like, hey, I want a visa, and we look at their profile and say like, sorry, like it's not
There's
that I don't want to
not
take your money, but we cannot build a case on this, right? And we can give them some guidance like, look, if you achieve A, B, C, then maybe we can talk in 6 months and then we can go for it. So that's very common. So I would say that as soon as you realize that you might want to come to the US eventually in the next 1 to 3 years, you should speak with someone and just make sure that you have what it takes to get that visa. But then assuming you already have that, I would say that the average preparation time the average preparation time is like 3 to 4 to 5 months. We are now making them in like 5, 6 weeks when the clients are proactive and they are sending on things, because there's a lot of things that you depend on the client to send to you. But let's assume 2, 3 months, right? Just an average in the industry, well, 3 to 4. But whatever, like a few months to prepare, then you submit the file to USCIS. If everything goes well, in 3 weeks, because you paid premium processing, you get an approval. They might ask you for more information, which adds a few months, but let's say with the happy path, right? So 2, 3 months to prepare everything, 3 weeks for them to respond to you, then 1 week more for them to send you the approval notice, 1 week to get the consulate appointment that are typically very fast, and then one more week to receive the passport in your home. Right? So we're talking about maybe 3 to 4 to 5 months since you started the process until you get the visa stamp um, on your passport and ready to come to the US.
That's actually quicker than I expected, honestly. Um,
I mean,
one of
that's a happy path. I've heard of
that's
attorneys taking 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, right? So if your
right.
provider
It's
kind
going
of
to
makes sense,
vary, but
yeah,
if we're looking at average, 3 to 4 months, that's a pretty quick turnaround, actually. Um,
yeah. If
so
things go well and
if
you
things
are
go,
proactive and you have all the documents and the provider is quick, right? If not, it might take 6 months or more, right? So, and we have had clients we have worked with for 10 months because basically they weren't sending us the documentation, right? It's like, yeah, I'll send you the documents. But then, of course, you have a life, you have a work, you're not doing this full time. So it will vary. But yeah, if you're highly motivated, I think, 3 months to have the visa in your hand, it's a
So
achievable goal.
let me ask you something else. What is the most common reason that you would reject someone as a client and say, hey, you're not prepared? Is it education level? Is it, not having a certain skill set that you could actually argue about? What are the most common reasons you would say, here, go back and do XYZ and then come back and see me in 6 months?
So it's highly variable and dependent on the type of visa. So the reasons you would reject someone for an E2 are widely different from an O1. But if
Right.
you're going for the O1, right, that is the most common for founders, the O1 is about being an expert in your field and being recognized as an expert in your field, right? So it's very much about your public profile. So when you look at the categories, right, there's 8 categories. You need to get at least three. So one of them is, you know, being covered in press, writing articles in trade publications, having been invited to be a judge for other professionals, having had a critical role in an organization. There's a lot about, having gotten prestigious awards in your industry or being selected to prestigious memberships, right, that are highly selective. So it's a lot about, the public recognition. So sometimes there's people that are very, very successful, but they never raised funding, they never got press, they never gone to awards, to memberships, to anything. They just do their thing. And here's when sometimes clients get frustrated because when I tell them, it's like, look, there's what's impressive in real life, there's what's impressive for the O1, and they don't always match, right?
Right.
So sometimes even if you have been extremely successful, you do need to work on some of these things just to get what the regulations ask, right? Like we might agree with it, we might not agree with it, but it is what it is. And if you want to get that visa, you need to kind of play that game and achieve what they deem to
Put
be
yourself out
successful and
there.
extraordinary. Yeah.
Pay the extra money for the who's who in environmental science or something.
Yeah, and
Not
it's
really. That's not a
yeah, I
real,
know.
it's not a real
Yeah,
thing, but yeah.
yeah. No, but you also need to be careful because it's very important that you build your profile in an organic way. So there's been lately a lot of noise more on the green card side of things, of like people that had clearly paid for some awards or for some things, and then they got their green card revoked, and it's an issue. And also not of all these things are made equal. So for example, not all press articles are useful. It depends on a lot of things. So that's why before starting to improve your profile, it's really, really important that you speak with someone like an attorney that can guide you through and can let you know exactly like what of these new achievements that you're going to go after are really helpful and what are basically a waste of your time.
That's great advice for everyone. Let's see if we have any questions from our viewers that are related to their specific issues or things that they're wanting to know regarding the different types of visas and items. I haven't seen a lot of chatter on here. Waiting to see if we're coming up with any questions from our viewers. I'm trying to think of other things. I know that one thing that we haven't really talked about a lot is overall costs. Let's talk about the different visas and let's talk about how much, and let's assume that we're going to pay that 2805 or whatever it was expedited fee because I'm not waiting around for, 8, 10 months for somebody to dig through my 1,000 pages of applications. So let's add that 2805 to it. I think you had a tool on your website that helps with these
Yeah,
applications.
yeah, I do. Let's do the example with the O1. So we have this is publicly available for everyone to see. So you can just come here to pricing.
And just before
So
we move on with that, there is going to be an email follow-up for all of our
yeah,
viewers. It has a link that'll take you straight to Tukey's website where you can access all of the free tools that he has available there.
yeah. So basically, we made this tool to answer these questions. So the pricing, for example, in our case, we charge like 10K for an O1 petition. Some people charge 12, some people charge 8. Like but just to get the gist of it, like generally speaking, that's a more or less like industry standard. And then in terms of government and other fees, depending on some things you respond here, you will get because there's variance, right? Depending if your company is large, small, if you have dependents or not. Like there's a lot of prices that change. It's not just one price. So that's why we made this calculator. So you can just see like what are the different fees. This is the one we're talking about, the premium processing fee, the 2,100. And then in terms of timeline, you can also see, you can get more optimistic or you can get more pessimistic, and you can see what happens if you get an overfeed. I think like the government wants to see more information on how that like impacts your timeline. And you can also see like when you would need to pay, because it's not all upfront, right? So it's also helpful just to plan from a cash flow perspective, what you need to pay when, and what's the average. Because we kept getting these questions, right? Like what's the right visa for me? What's the cost? What's the time? So we essentially said, okay, let's build free tools for people just to avoid paying like $250 to speak with an attorney to get these responses. So at least you get some quick guidance and just to get an overall view on these costs.
Right, a rough idea. And it's really great that you can go in and you can select details related to your own situation. Again, not legal advice, just a tool that you can use to get a rough idea on cost, on timelines, and then the type of visa that you would most likely be approved for. Um, I do have another question because I have seen some chatter where someone comes in maybe on a student or just coming in as a tourist visa. Um, and maybe they go do a little business on the side. What if they're caught? Does this impact their ability to then apply for?
So So there's the tourist visa, there's the business visa, B1, B2, and a lot of people get both. So in the visa stamp, it's B1/B2. So that means that you can do tourism and business. What you cannot do is work, right? And there's like a fine line there. So
Mhm.
business means you come to see investors, you come to a conference, you come to sign contracts, you come to explore business opportunities. So all that is okay. What you cannot do is work. You cannot be, handling day-to-day operations, working with your team. All that is prohibited. And if you do that, if you do unauthorized work, that can have severe consequences of losing your visa, having a really hard time getting a new one. So we, of course, highly discourage people from doing unauthorized work. Um, Immigration is a long journey.
Yep.
I understand the temptation sometimes, like, well, a bit, it was only 2 months, but it's a very risky thing to do, in my opinion, and you're jeopardizing your entire immigration journey in the future. So, um, yeah, I would try to get a proper work visa if you want to work.
Yeah. So things like you have a week-long conference, maybe in San Francisco or New York, where you're presenting, it is just a conference. That that's one of those kind of gray areas. Yes, you're
No,
working,
that that
or
that's
that's okay
okay.
to
No,
present.
that's okay. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Coming to present for, assuming you're not getting paid, right? You're just coming invited to a conference just to present, to be a panelist, to be a judge. You're coming for an accelerator to participate of that week. You're going to another conference. You're signing contracts with people. So that's considered conducting business. It's not necessarily working, right? So if you're there, again, right, working would be you come here for 2 months, you stay with the team full time, you work 9 to 5. Like that's not right. And again, if you have questions about this, you should talk to a licensed attorney on where,
Absolutely.
because there are some things that are getting to that gray area, right? There's clear things that are very clearly working. There are things that are clearly business, but of course, right? Like life is not absolute, and sometimes you are kind of in the middle. So in those situations, it's good to talk with an attorney because there's many considerations and the regulations are not perfect, and sometimes there's a lot of things with room of interpretation. But I always try to be as conservative as I can because there's discretion here. So if the officer at the airport gets their opinion that you are lying and you're actually working, it's hard, right? It's hard because they have discretion and they can deny your entry because of their hunch, right? So So it's better to stay, I would say, on the conservative side of things and not play with it. And if you're starting to come to the US too often or with long stays or whatever, even if you're conducting business, at some point, I would say it's better to just get a visa just to avoid questions or an unpleasant situation in secondary inspection room.
Awesome. Yeah, so there's nuances involved there, obviously, especially when
A
we're
lot.
talking about founders, when we're talking about startups, because there could be meetings with VCs where they're, okay, well, we want to start the business in the US. It's not started, but we want to talk about, let's meet in person. But are you doing business? Are you not? That's where you pull in legal counsel and make sure you are in the country and you're not going to get kicked out. Don't get kicked out.
Yeah, and look like like especially non-speaking non-English speakers, like not the first language, right? For you doing business or working is kind of the same. So sometimes you go to the airport, yeah, I'm here to work. And it's like, no, you are
No.
not. You're here to conduct business. But in your mind, it's like the same, right? Like, yeah, business work or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's not, right? And how to prove what type of documents to bring just to show that it's bona fide intention to do business, to conduct business, not to work. So there's some of these nuances which are kind of important. And it's an overall story, right? It's never just a checklist of things. It's always like, oh, well, it depends, right? You're coming here for 2 weeks, but if you were 2 weeks like last week and then you left for 5 days and you're coming back, then that might be a problem. Whereas like you come 2 weeks in 6 months, it doesn't. And there's a lot of like things, and you just need to look at the overall perspective and just make a judgment call. So that's why I
And
think having
and
this experienced
really,
attorneys.
I would not, and really it's definitely best to get legal advice on that. You guys are not you specifically, you do, but you're not a lawyer. I'm going to keep that clear. You use your legal advisors. They see these situations over and over and over again. They have a handle on which ones really are you working and which ones that are going to be considered as you just here to do business. And keeping that into perspective, is very important. It's very important. I mean, I'm sitting here still, mind just boggled over 1,000 pieces of paper, and I cannot imagine how many of those pieces of paper have to be physically signed by someone applying for that visa. That alone would prevent me from doing anything to jeopardize that, just because I'm like, let me type it up. Can we not do this via DocuSign? No, I'm guessing that most cases for this stuff you cannot. So that alone would be a deterrent for me. So and that tells you how little I like to pick up a pen and actually write anything anymore. So maybe a little bit too
Yeah.
much about me, but really and truly, we just want to make sure that people are able to come into the US, get here legally, conduct business or work once they do have their visas and are eligible to work in the US, and create these wonderful, amazing companies, and just really, really contribute to the US economy and to their own personal selves. I know what we did not talk about, Ramiro. Let's talk about families as it relates to these visas. People are
Yeah.
coming to build lives, not just for themselves, but also for their families. And some visas, you can bring your spouse, your children. Sometimes they can work, sometimes they can't work. Let's talk
Yeah.
about the last few minutes.
Yeah. So you can always bring your family, your direct family. That means your spouse and kids under 21. If they are more than 21, you cannot anymore. They are kind of their own self and you cannot have them as dependents. So that's something to consider in certain cases. Um, Spouses can work under certain visas. From the four we saw, the E2 and the L1 permit allow the spouse to work. The O1 doesn't. And the H-1B doesn't, except you have that situation where you are already in the green card process, you get something approved, and then the spouse can start working there, but it's kind of a special situation. And then once you get the green card, then yes, with the green card, all of it, let's say you have a family of four, when you get a green card, it's not just yourself, but everyone gets a green card. Right? So that's a big difference. So when you get a work visa, yourself, you get, let's say for the O1, you get the O1 and then your dependent gets the O3. It's a different visa. For the L1, it's L1 and L2, H1B, H4. It's different. But once you get the green card, even though the green card was based on the main applicant, all the family gets green cards. So the four of them gets a green card. It's four separated processes, and now you all are permanent residents of the US, and you can work and everything. Now, beyond work, you can do everything else. You can study, you can live there, you can get a mortgage, you can get a car. Like in that way, the only limitation is with certain work visas for the spouse to work. But other than that, you can have pretty normal lives, going to school and all these things. So it's generally the only conflict sometimes is when the spouse needs or wants to work and you are with a visa that doesn't allow that.
So in those cases, have you seen successful instances where the spouse then applies for their own visa and is
Yeah.
able to work? Any shortcuts to that? Any speeding up, or is it just the same process?
So the two, no, the two options is either what you just mentioned, the spouse getting their own visa, or accelerating the green card process. So maybe the only, you only have a gap of like 1 year or even less where you cannot work and you start with a green card pretty quickly. And then eventually, in some time you get the work authorization or the green card directly, and then you can start working. A lot of times we see spouses maybe take a year off, or maybe they do a master study or something like that, just to, do something else in the meantime. But yeah, unfortunately, other than those two or three things, there's not a lot of shortcuts.
Well, and that's to be expected, but it never hurts to ask, right? I
Yeah,
can
of
imagine
course.
having that time to actually go back to school um, and just or sit at home and eat bonbons. Not really, not really. But there's a lot to explore in the U.S. So
Yeah,
for when you have spouses and children coming over, that's not so horrible of a thing if you can afford to actually travel and get to know some of the U.S. I have not been to all 50 states. Very few
yeah,
U.S. citizens have been to all 50 states. So there's a
yeah,
lot to see and do in the U.S. Um,
of course.
so that for that. Anything else that you can think of, Ramiro, that would be useful information? We've gone over a
No,
lot.
yeah, we're going over a lot. My final piece of advice is, as we said, plan with time. Sometimes these things take more than you think, not just for preparing the petition, but just to prepare your profile. Make sure you understand the different options. Sometimes I hear people, yeah, my attorney recommended X visa, but actually they had a much better option available. They didn't know. So just understanding the different visa types and understanding the implications of those visa types, right? Including the family, including the duration, the if it's renewable or not, or for how long. Like just treat US immigration as a marathon, not just a sprint, and just plan not just for the immediate step, but for the next one and the next one, all the way through this citizenship. And that's I think the right way to think about it. Just not to have headaches later on when you're already in the country and you're already, with short time and it becomes stressful. So I think just making that upfront planning, it's the best advice I think I can give you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I want to thank you for joining me on the first series. I
Thanks to
am
you.
super looking forward to the next one. And just to let the audience know, our next series is going to be about entity creation. Your visas, some of them have to be corporately sponsored. And in order to have that happen, you either have to be working for a large company who is going to sponsor you to come to the US, or in cases with a lot of our founders, you are creating a company in the US yourself. And so on our next episode, we are going to be partnering with a company called CorpNet, who manages this online. And we're going to talk about the different states where you can create an entity, the different entity types, whether you're looking at LLCs, whether you're looking at C Corps, and the advantages and disadvantages of each. along with state registrations and what you need to do and what you need to plan ahead to get set up to actually have your business exist in the US. So really looking forward to that. And again, I appreciate you, Ramiro. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And we will post the date for the next LinkedIn Live series. I'm looking at the end of September, 1st of October. Depending on schedules, we'll have that posted on LinkedIn shortly. Thank you so much, Ramiro.
Okay, thanks to you, Rachel, and the entire Escalon team.